Welcome, everyone. This is the second in a two-part series highlighting the technology early career preparation intervention, also known as TechPrep. Earlier this spring, we shared information regarding the conceptualization and early implementation of the model. Today, we will focus on participant engagement, early outcomes, and next steps. I would like to take a moment to introduce our panelists today. First, we have Dr. Timothy Tansey, who serves as the principal investigator, the PI, through the University of Wisconsin-Madison. We have our graduate student coaches through the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Sara Park, Megan Ramirez, and Marcus Weathers Jr. We also have David Douglas, who is the founder of Yolobe, which is now yolBe. And we have Meera Patel, who's a web designer and former yolBe intern. And I'm Cayte Anderson. I work with the University of Wisconsin-Stout in close collaboration with the University of Wisconsin-Madison team and partners on this project. We appreciate you joining us today. And now I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Tansey.
Well, welcome back for part two of our overview of the Careers in Technology model. If you haven't seen part one of this series, we welcome you to do so when it is convenient for you. Part one focused primarily on describing the conceptualization and development of what we'll collectively call the TechPrep program. In thinking about this program and brief highlight as far as what you can see from that program, really focused on what was the initial guiding concept behind developing this program. It was focused on working with youth with intellectual or developmental disabilities living in the Chicago area who are also persons of color, and trying to provide a different pathway, a career pathway to careers in technology that would allow them to further their own interests, their own careers, and ultimately have, again, another pathway towards the middle class. We also provide information on the intervention itself, which included our recruitment strategies, the overall assessment that we were looking at changes in participant behavior and outcomes over time. This program also provides information on the curricular development, and specific to looking at the soft skills training, TechPrep adaptations, looking at the designing of specific modules that relate both to soft skills as well as career development, overall well-being program, and really the learning and communication platform that makes this entire training program work. In addition, we also cover the basics of the summer internship program provided by yolBe to provide applied paid working experience to these youth in the program to further their career interest and career development in technology, in careers in coding. Lastly, we provide an overview of the project timeline from the online training component to the length of the internship in order to provide some sense of the overall approach and the implementation of that approach.
Thank you for the overview and the recap, Dr. Tansey. To start us off, I want to provide just a little more detail of the purpose of TechPrep. TechPrep is a research project studying the value of early career preparation program in the field of technology and computer for transition age youth ages between 16 and 24-year-old with IDD. Participants are purposefully recruited from a diverse racial and cultural backgrounds. Largely, TechPrep is two parts consisting of the online soft skills curriculum and the summer internship placement in technology company. The soft skills curriculum seeks to teach employability skills, promote self-determination, and introduce career pathways in STEM. The online soft skills curriculum is an 8 to 9 weeks of virtual training and coaching offered in fall and in spring semester before the summer internship. Studies support that soft skills are key to finding and maintaining employment. The program also emphasizes and supports students' mental and physical wellness through behavior activation program. And finally, the students engage in paid summer internship opportunity at career social networking platform company based in Chicago area.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, so let's go over our agenda before we get started today. So we're focusing on implementation for this part 2. So first we'll go over the program schedule, orientation, and then curriculum activities. Next, we'll go over challenges and problem solving, tips going forward, and evaluations. And then we'll go over peer mentorship. You'll have an opportunity to hear from our 2 peer mentors. And then graduation, next steps, and the future of TechPrep. So we intentionally offered several orientation times during our orientation week to meet the schedule needs of all the participants. We have 6 soft skills modules covered over the 6 weeks of soft skills training. We have 1 catch up or break week. And then we also offer, and then we end with a graduation week with a graduation ceremony. As you can see on the table on your screen, so week 1 is orientation and a welcome module. Week 2 is our communication module, and we share some getting started in coding videos. Week 3 is on enthusiasm and attitude and impression management. Week 4 covers teamwork and behavioral activation unit number 1, which will be discussed later. Week 5 covers networking and behavioral activation unit 2. Week 6 covers problem solving, critical thinking, and behavioral activation unit 3. Week 7 covers professionalism and behavioral activation unit 4. And then week 6, we hold our graduation ceremony.
Initially, we began with offering 1-hour mandatory meetings with the idea to focus mainly on our synchronous activities in the sessions. We observed a lack of engagement and retention of material, along with the loss of motivation with our pilot cohort. This led us to implementing an additional second meeting for extra support with content material. We noticed with cohort 1, as we offered more meetings, the students became more invested. This inspired us to flip the classroom with the idea of assigning lectures, videos, and quizzes as homework, while meetings became centered around both activities to recognize the significance of soft skills and how to apply each of them in the world of work.
Now we're going to talk about orientation. We can go to the next slide. So once students have completed the intake process, we offer several orientation sessions during the first week of the program. We found that orientation worked best with 3 to 4 students and at least 1 peer mentor. We will likely continue to offer several orientations with a larger number of student enrollments so that we can continue to provide more individualized support as needed in each orientation session. Orientation began after the pilot cohort. We will discuss several challenges and problem-solving process in more detail in the later slides, but one main problem we saw was difficulty engaging the students initially, especially with just email communication and virtual learning platform. We saw a need to, 1, make the program more engaging and interesting to the students, and 2, establish a line of communication moving forward to answer any questions and to check in with the students. And many students are learning to use Canvas for the first time, so we found it also helpful to provide additional instructions on how to navigate the course website. We also found using orientation time to get students to download Hangout and try chatting with us right there and then help us keep in touch with the students a lot easier. That really establishes the line of communication with these social coaches and helps us troubleshoot problems quickly with the students, whether it be absences or needing help finding where things are. We also use orientation to introduce program timeline and establish weekly schedule. Between 3 busy graduate students and busy youth who are in different programs and jobs, we found that scheduling can pose some challenges. Currently, the social coaches identify times that work for us and then offer that to the students. And we found that evening times are often more popular with the students and tend to work better for us as well. We do send out a scheduling poll after the orientation, but introducing the weekly schedule, letting the students know about the form they need to fill out and why they need to fill the form out has been helpful to do during the orientation as well. Next slide, please. So in this slide, I want to highlight an icebreaker activity we incorporated into the orientations. Among Us is an online game you can play on phone or a computer. Game allows up to 10 players. It's similar to the game of Mafia, where there are basically 2 teams with different agendas. And Among Us does several things. First, Among Us acts as an informal assessment. It allows us to learn about different devices that students have access to and prefers. Some students really like to be on their tablets. Some students do not have smartphones. It also allows us to learn about varying skill levels with navigating technology. Are students comfortable finding, downloading, and navigating different mobile and computer apps? Second, Among Us is an icebreaker. Many students have let us know that they enjoy playing games during their free time. They also let us know that they enjoyed playing Among Us during the orientation. It quickly puts the students in a virtual environment where they're interacting and working with each other. We do introductions and discussions as we debrief after playing the game. This adds a layer of intimacy as we introduce one another. When you introduce yourself and who you were in the game, students get a sense of meeting the person for the second time. For instance, you might be finding yourself saying, "Oh, you were yellow. I knew you weren't the imposter." Also, this icebreaker activity is a great lead into the curriculum introductions because Among Us touches on important soft skills that we're trying to teach and provide an opportunity to talk about coding and app development. As part of our debrief discussions, we talk about a few different things related to the curriculum. We discuss games and game development, talk about coding and debugging as related to tasks they completed during the game, and also introduce the nature of the program. Finally, we also discuss communication and teamwork skills that they might already have and were able to use during the session. Next slide, please.
And now we'll discuss the curriculum activities. Before describing our curriculum activities, it is critical to note that we all have various learning styles and different kinds of minds. We applied this understanding with respect to our incoming students as we designed the curriculum with the intention to honor the unique needs of each individual student. The following slides will capture how we cultivated a diverse learning environment that acknowledges the various styles presented on this slide. Next slide.
So an example of interactive and hands-on activity that I wanted to highlight is the Listen Here paper cutting activity from the communication module. This activity utilizes both verbal and kinesthetic learning strategies to teach that communication is both ways, that if only one party communicates, in this case, the person giving the directions, then it is likely that we won't get the uniform result because people all think differently and there are a lot of room for miscommunication when it's unidirectional. So communication is the first module, and this is the first activity that students complete for this curriculum. Initially, we had this as a homework activity where students complete individually and post as a discussion thread, but we found it helpful to move it into the live coaching session because it's an engaging interactive activity. This activity also acts as another icebreaker. What I really like about this activity is that it teaches the students that there isn't a right answer to many of the activities that we do together. Some students have let us know that they don't want to mess it up. We tell them that the papers are supposed to look different, that communication is key to problem solving and conflict resolution. Finally, this activity is low stakes in that they are not sharing anything too personal on their first day. They're getting their feet wet, so to speak, and are having some fun while doing it. We've had students tell us what shape theirs look like. Ours may look like a kite, a mask, a tortoise, and that was fun for us and for the students. It also teaches them that it's okay to have different answers and to be different.
So foreshadowing into the challenges, one thing we noticed is how crowded the talking space can be on Zoom or vice versa. Not to say that 3 people excited to share or having extra time to process is a bad thing, but oftentimes it takes away from the synergy of the group and the flow of the discussion. So I introduced the talking circle with the notion of maintaining a balanced, fluid discussion group with hopes each individual student would feel encouraged to share their ideas. Peer mentors were asked to lead and model appropriate answers followed by a blend of new students and social coaches. The goal here was to increase confidence in our peer mentors empower all students' voices, and develop a community that would begin to get familiar with each other's names. Another effective and popular activity was the use of role plays to better understand how these soft skills are valued in the workforce. We were able to use the Zoom breakout room function to divide into small groups for role play. These role-playing activities give students a chance to apply acquired knowledge, develop problem-solving skills specific to the course content, and increase their understanding of the subject matter.
And here's an example of one of our activities. This activity is called What Shape Are You? This is an activity from the teamwork module. In this activity, participants identify their own personality types. By discussing their own personality types and those of others in the cohort, they have an opportunity to learn about individual differences and the value of those differences. Participants can also learn about the importance of being aware of the personality types of those that you work with and how to navigate those. And now let's talk about quizzes. So quizzes can be something that many individuals with IDD find difficult. So we made sure that they were short and concise, nothing too taxing. We made it developmentally appropriate. We were very intentional with the language we put into these quizzes, and they serve several purposes. So for one, they were a way for students to consolidate their learning. For us, they were a way to keep track of progress. And that was very important to us because we want to see whether what we were teaching and how we were teaching was really sticking with the students. So we use the results of the quizzes to inform our future practice. And for this specific quiz, we were talking about praise, criticism, or feedback. In particular, this is a very difficult topic for individuals with IDD and really anyone in general to kind of differentiate and know how to accept and know how to give. So we talked about the differences, and then something that I really appreciate that we did is we made sure it wasn't just statements that students read, but there were also audio recordings as well. Because sometimes it's not only the words itself and the message behind the words, but the tone that praise, criticism, or feedback is given can really change the meaning and how you receive it and how you respond to it. And this is one of those specific questions. So the question is, it would work better for me if you could explain my version of the story out loud before you ask questions. So we have the students read it, we have the students listen to it once or twice as they wish, and then they choose whether they think it's praise, feedback, or criticism. And then we discuss as a group why we think it's one or the other. And if it happens to be criticism for those, then we ask, okay, how can we change it to make it feedback?
As we mentioned before, we reduced the homework load and expectation by assigning the lecture videos and additional resources, followed by quizzes that measured comprehension of content material. We also use discussion boards for some modules to promote deeper, thoughtful participation and reinforce our collaborative learning environment. Lastly, as we progressed throughout the course, we were able to then assign various worksheets as homework and reflect on them in session. It's important to note that we first began with building a healthy therapeutic alliance and community before adding in supplemental tasks and work. Sara will further describe one of the assignments students worked through.
Thank you. This is an example of a homework activity. The purpose of this activity is to engage in social circles assessment, leading into further insight for the students. For example, here the student goes to identify 3 varying degrees of relationship from those most intimate to distant. This is an activity that utilized in Peers Social Skills Training Program for the UCLA for Youth with Autism. Activity can help students better understand their support system in place, and this can help identify and utilize their relationships for networking. And we're going to go into challenges and problem solving. And I really do believe that this is the meat of the presentation for us.
Yes, thank you, Sara. And we use the word challenges, but a lot of these things aren't necessarily negative in any sense. There are things that we noticed and things that we thought we could improve on. And we tried to problem solve different solutions, and then through trial and error, tried to address these concerns. So our first challenge was how to best support students with varying support needs and varying strengths. So some of our solutions that we found helpful were to build an extra individual support sessions for some students who would benefit from that. We also adapted existing materials and programs using plain language. We also used Immersive Reader, which is a read aloud program for students who benefit from that. We also provided audio recordings, lecture transcripts, multiple concrete examples. That was very important to us. And then peer support through peer mentors, because as much as I think Sarah, Marcus, and I are relatively young and relatable, sometimes it is just so much more interesting and meaningful to learn from a peer. We also included videos with closed captioning. And our last solution for this was we provided additional resources for advanced students. If you're in the teaching field, you might know these by the name of fast finishers.
In our first presentation, we discussed the challenges in building a community through a virtual learning environment. A big obstacle we had to overcome is finding ways to effectively communicate with our audience and to mutually meet both parties' needs. We addressed this by introducing them to Google Hangouts during orientation. This allows students to have a more casual and quicker way to relay messages back and forth with peers and social coaches. This chat has been used to share interest, ask questions, and provide necessary information regarding the course. Another point to mention would be having content-heavy meetings versus using theme-focused icebreakers to build rapport and smoothly transition into the material we will be covering. This provides students with an equal opportunity to participate and more meaningful outcomes.
The third group of challenges are related to students' attention and focus, as well as communication. Some students lose focus and attention during sessions. This might be because they become preoccupied with a topic of their interest and get sidetracked from the topic at hand. Sometimes they engage in oversharing of their personal stories. Students may lose attention and focus because they misunderstand the topic or topic at hand. One example of this is when we ask the students, do you think our attitude, whether positive or negative, is something that we're born with or that we have power to control within ourselves? And a student answered, my power is I want to fly. So in this case, they really keyed in on the one word, power. So another communication challenge is due to distractions in the physical environment. And the solutions we found for these challenges include reflecting and summarizing the content, asking clarifying questions, showing empathy, redirecting as needed, rephrasing as appropriate, giving students enough processing time. Sometimes that extra 5 seconds is all they need to make that connection. That means as we social coaches are practicing, we just need to be more comfortable with silence sometimes.
All right, and now let's talk about challenge number 4, virtual learning and technology. So one of the things we've observed is through virtual learning, through these video meetings, you can only see so much of a person's body. You're really only seeing their head and their shoulders. So you're missing out on a lot of social cues and possibly engagement. So for example, maybe somebody's nervous, but you don't see that their hands are fidgeting, and you don't know necessarily what's around in their environment. So there are all these things that we can't necessarily notice and respond to. There are also technical issues due to lack of high-speed, reliable internet. Several students had poor internet. Sometimes it was consistently poor, sometimes just once in a while. So there were problems like video lagging, complete loss of video, audio problems, or a combination of these. And then another important consideration is access to devices. We never want to assume that students have access to devices or access to reliable high-speed internet. And so one of the solutions we came up with for engagement specifically was to make sure we start off a question with a student's name to make it clear who we're addressing. Also related to engagement, we encourage students to keep their video on from day one. We did this by modeling it, and we also explicitly said that, that would be something we would prefer. But also we explicitly stated and realized that there are many reasons why someone might not feel comfortable having their video on, or it might not be possible depending on where they are. So there was never any pressure for students to keep their video on. And then we also provided options for students to call into Zoom. So if, let's say, the bandwidth wasn't enough for video, but a call would be fine, a phone call would be fine. Maybe there was a problem with the computer, but the phone was fine. We were completely fine with that and help students navigate that, because it does require a couple extra steps to use on a phone versus a computer or a tablet. And then with all these technical issues, we made sure that we were flexible, understanding, and patient. We showed empathy. And then we also used humor to decrease frustration and say, oh my goodness, technology, it's, I love it, but I hate it. How about you guys? How do you feel about it? Are you having all these problems too? Oh my goodness, let me tell you about the other day, this tech problem I had. And using those stories and using the rapport we've built just to make sure frustration or any other negative emotion didn't build. And something that is part of the program is that, oh, my cat, Chromebooks will be provided to all the participants for use during their internship, and they will be able to use it. Something that we're thinking about for next time is I wonder if maybe we can provide those Chromebooks to students during this part of the program, the social skills part of the program. So that would be one less concern. Access to devices would be one less concern for students.
And the last thing to consider is that we all come from different walks of life with a wide range of circumstances, meaning that their learning environment may not be conducive to their learning experience because active family members, pets, scheduling conflicts, or unsteady connection. For example, we experienced a student that was experiencing homelessness, and we were able to shift our focus into their well-being and their needs versus going through the expected lecture. So regardless of the situation, it is important to be mindful of how these factors may impact students' ability to engage effectively. A way to resolve this conflict begins with establishing a routine schedule with flexibility as necessary. And this is done with the aforementioned Google poll we send out after orientation. By having a synchronous schedule, students show up on time and prepared to engage in daily activities and with one another. Another important factor would be to introduce Zoom etiquette with recommendations such as muting yourself when you're not speaking, encouraging the use of chat, and raising your hand either physically or using Zoom functions. By instilling these small changes, we notice a much smoother flow to our meetings and sessions.
In this section, we're going to talk about tips going forward. Next slide, please. One of the teaching tips I want to emphasize is to understand and remember that youth with intellectual developmental disabilities often have more receptive than expressive language. This means giving them enough time to articulate, check understanding through questions. There is often more to the content than what's communicated, so summarize and say it back to them, or have them summarize and say it back to you to make sure that they're understanding the content. Also consider the breadth and depth of content being taught. Think about horizontal learning, meaning finding opportunities to generalize, to make further connections between what is said and the content. And also think about vertical learning to find opportunities to encourage and facilitate deeper connections to promote critical thinking and insight.
Another tip is to be very aware of the prompt levels you use. So we varied our prompt levels to the different participants. And when possible, as often as possible, we use the more independent and least intrusive prompts, just to encourage independence among the participants, not only in their conversations with us, but in their conversations with each other as well. And now let's talk a little bit more about one of those prompt levels, modeling. So modeling is something that social coaches did for participants and also something that peer mentors did for participants. So one of the models of teaching we used was the I do, we do, you do model. So we would model it, social coaches or the peer mentors. So that's the I do part. The we do part would be we would engage in the activity together as a whole group. And then the you do part is that the participants did it independently without the peer mentor's assistance or without the social coach's assistance. We made sure to use a lot of examples when we were modeling, just to make it very concrete, because we know that individuals with IDD really learn well with concrete examples, multiple concrete examples. We also made sure to give youth ample time to form sentences. Everybody has different processing time, and that's even without considering those technical issues we mentioned earlier. Another thing we wanted to encourage was turn taking. So for example, some youth might be so excited, they just want to keep talking and talking. And as wonderful as that was, we want to make sure that other participants have the chance to talk as well. And you can practice taking turns speaking and follow that more common conversation flow that you'll see in many social settings, work settings, etc. So often it was very explicit. So we would say things like, I think ... and then say, oh, what do you think, Megan? Just to make it very clear that you wanted somebody else's feedback. You wanted to engage in a back and forth conversation. Another tip we would recommend is using the popcorn technique. So instead of having the social coaches say, alrighty, you talk, now you talk, now you talk, that's not very natural, right? So something a little bit more natural is the popcorn technique, and it gave students a bit more ownership. So I might choose on one person to share or answer a question, and then I would, if necessary, give that prompt, oh, who would you like to popcorn it off to? And then they would choose another student to speak. So this created a bit more camaraderie and communication between the students, and not just from social coaches to students. We also went over Zoom etiquette, which is something I think everybody's been learning these last couple months. So when to have the microphone on, when to have it off. If you need to go and get a snack, make sure you mute yourself while you're eating, things like that. We also practice greetings, and we're very intentional about what greetings are appropriate in this kind of setting and in work settings. And we also did check-ins at the start of every session. The time varied depending on the kind of check-in we did and depending on how the participants were doing. But it was very important to us to make sure the students had the capacity and were in a good place to go through that day's session, and that we addressed any concerns that came up and celebrated any victories or good news that came up in their lives. So for example, when a student was having an interview that following week, we talked about, oh, how are you feeling about it? Maybe a mix of emotions, excited and nervous. All right, what can you do to prepare for that? And then afterwards, after the interview, it's like, oh, how did that go? So following up and making sure that we're keeping up with the students and what they share with us, that really helped build rapport and trust among us all. And then we also modeled respectful language, which wasn't a concern, but it's always a good thing to model and practice. And then one method we used was the flipped classroom method. So in this method, students do a lot of work outside of class, so that then in class you can focus more on the discussion. So they're not necessarily watching so for example, the participants did not watch the lecture videos during session with us. They watched it on their own time. And then in session, we were able to discuss that and move deeper into the material. Another tip we would recommend is scaffolding. So scaffolding is asking guiding questions to help lead students in the right direction. So we made sure to break down information, concepts, directions, etc., into manageable chunks and pieces. And we also made sure not to just give them verbally, but they were either on screen if we were sharing a PowerPoint, so they had that visual as well, or they were in the chat. So for example, we might say something like, remember that time, ... What did you learn there? To kind of promote recall of prior knowledge and expand their understanding of the desired topic. And as discussed before, discussion. You cannot have enough discussion is what we found. It really makes the material more meaningful, and it allows the students to make those connections to their own lives. So we, vary the time we set aside for it, depending on the purpose of the discussion and depending on the particular needs and interests of our participants.
So additionally, it is important to provide required content material with either visual or audio or a combination of both to reinforce key concepts. Consider designing PowerPoint lectures with embedded audio, a transcript to follow, and discussion questions to really maximize students' learning experience. We also have mentioned certain activities that are rooted in audio messages to have students observe the importance of tone in conjunction to the words being said. Another important tip, as Megan had just mentioned, was the use of the chat for discussion and for everybody to be engaged. Students might miss the discussion question or their speaking order, so it's important to use the chat to navigate necessary information. Another tool would be to use silence, as it can be a powerful tool to give students time to fully process what's being asked and their answer. While the goal of the research project is to introduce students into the world of work and appropriate behaviors in the workplace, the priority is the promotion of students' health and wellness. As mentioned before, there have been counseling micro skills that we use, such as humor or reflection, that guide us through our sessions. While the goal of the research project is to introduce students into the world of work and appropriate behaviors in the workplace, the priority is the promotion of students' health and wellness. While doing this, it's important to maintain our professional boundaries and our scope of practice, meaning rather than serving as a mental health counselor or a mentor or a friend, it's important that we still navigate the conversation into the world of work and maintain our identity as social skills coaches. Another important factor within this research project is the idea of diverse representation within our social skills coaches. It's important that students are working alongside individuals who not only look like them, but are able to recognize and identify some of the challenges and barriers they may be experiencing. This adds value as it creates a safe, open space for students to openly be themselves.
In this slide, I want to touch on student and curriculum evaluations. First, we check student performance using the grades function in the Canvas. Main purpose of this is to help us keep track of students' task completion, especially since we're giving out incentives for completion of each modules. But this also helps us know whether content is clear. For example, if all students are doing poorly on a quiz, that tells us that there is room for improvement with how it's written. Feedback also comes directly from students. There is an evaluation survey at the end of each module to check understanding and to receive feedback. We also ask feedback periodically from students during sessions, either as a check-in or end of session discussions. Example of some of the feedback we received include wanting more interactions, more role plays, or other specific activities. We're finding that many of our students have great talent and passion for acting. They also ask us to make things clickable, which is a good feedback, letting us know that we should make the course website more easy to navigate. From one cohort to another, we're continuing to improve, develop, and add to the curriculum based on these feedbacks.
Yes, and now let's talk about the peer mentorship opportunity. So this is an opportunity for cohort 1 participants to mentor cohort 2 participants by joining in on their sessions. So our 2 peer mentors took a leadership role in sessions by modeling skills and activities alongside social coaches. This was a paid volunteer position, so there was no pressure for any cohort 1 participants to join. 2 chose to, and I was very glad that they volunteered. I feel like this is definitely an experience in where they had the opportunity to practice and grow their own social skills and leadership skills. Now let's hear from our current peer mentors.
Thank you for speaking with me today. My name is Ramirez, and I participated in TechPrep program through fall, and I just joined TechPrep program for soft skills.
Yeah, tell me a bit about your experience in the Tech Prep program.
My experience that I did was I completed all modules, and my favorite module was module was communication skills.
Awesome, that first module. Great. Why was it your favorite module?
It was my favorite module to because communication skills are important for me.
Yeah, they're definitely important to have for any kind of job. And so you said you like the program. Would you recommend it to others?
I would recommend it to Alex because he's my best friend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's pretty cool. I think the current cohort, we have some people who are recommended by other participants. So that's pretty cool. It's definitely want to spread the word about this opportunity. Let's see. And what are your future career plans?
My future for the career plans are to join through my experience.
Mm-hmm. And
Mhm.
I guess where would you like to work after you graduate?
I would like to work at a technology bar. I would like to work at Intel headquarters.
Yeah, that would be really cool. Yeah. And you've got the summer internship coming up at YOLOBE, and that'll be a really good experience with the tech company. Yeah. Are you excited about that summer internship coming up?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Wait, I would like to work at Walmart.
Walmart's another great place to work. And since you like technology, you could work in their technology section or somewhere else. And what's nice about jobs is some people have the same job forever, but most people don't. So you could
Yeah,
always,
I said Walmart. I would just become a cashier register.
Yeah, that sounds like a cool job too. So one last question. What's it like being a peer mentor?
Peer mentor is when you communicate with others.
So far, do you like being a peer mentor?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, thank you for sharing with us today. All righty. Thanks for joining me today.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So could you tell our audience what's your name?
This is Grace Shea, and I'm 21 years old this year. This year, I was born on June 25th, 1999.
Awesome. And when did you participate in the Tech Prep program?
I participated in TechPrep in November 2020 and in the spring of March 2021.
And why did you join Tech Prep?
I joined in TechPrep because it helps me with problem solving and communication skills.
Tell me more about your experience in the program.
My experience is that I like doing group discussions. Like on Monday, we did the sharing circle.
Right. How did you like that activity?
I think this reminds me we always like take turns talking and discussing.
Oh, definitely an important communication skill to remember and practice. Yeah. And what was your favorite module or activity?
My favorite module is module 2 because it helps me to express my feelings, emotions, and attitude.
Right. Yeah, our module 2 on enthusiasm and attitude. Awesome. Would you recommend this program to others?
I would recommend it because it makes them feel proud if I shared my ideas, or I sometimes write my story in my journal. I showed it to my dad and and he likes the way how much I wrote a lot.
Oh, that's fantastic, Grace. Yeah. Oh, and an extra question is, could you tell everyone what's your role right now that you're an alum of the program?
My role is that I like to discuss what problems that we can solve together. And sometimes my future plans is that I'm looking forward to working with people at a retail store.
Yeah, and your role now as a peer mentor, you're getting a lot of good practice communicating with others and problem solving. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing, Grace. Is there anything else you'd like to tell people about TechPrep?
I learned that my future career plans is that I'm looking forward to singing on stage at church because I had such a great singing voice.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. And I think in that career, and for sure any career, all these skills are just really good to have in practice. So thank you so much for sharing with us all today.
Yeah.
And then lastly, graduation serves as termination and a transition into their internship opportunity with David and Meera at YolBe. Our team invites family, friends, and other important members of their network to recognize their commitment, dedication, and hard work over the past 8 weeks. Students are presented with a customized certificate and more information as to what experience they will be getting over the summer. Students get the chance to meet David and ask questions and also share interest as to what they are looking forward to doing over the summer. We also thank the parents and everybody else who supports these students and keep them informed via email through the next steps.
Before we end, I'd like to take a minute to discuss what we envision with this project. Career pathways in technology, sciences, engineering, and mathematics continue to grow. There's a need for increased representation of people with disabilities in this field. From my personal experience as an intern serving transition age youth through vocational programs, many current transition programs, transitional employment positions are limited to opportunities in unskilled or semi-skilled manual positions such as food prep, groceries, stocking, and janitorial work. And research also supports that transition age youth and intellectual and or developmental disabilities explore less varied career pathways. A recent study by Dr. Chen here at University of Wisconsin found that of the individuals with disabilities served under an IPE at the state federal VR between years 2017 and 2019, only 5.3% were engaged in STEM jobs and careers. TechPrep program seeks to broaden the career pathways, especially in the field of technology and computer science for transition age youth with IDD, especially for those with intersectional identities who may have further barriers to enter these fields. Our main goal is to continue to expand the program and to offer it to more students and to manualize the curriculum so that other organizations can replicate and provide TechPrep as a vocational training and service program.
Now I'll go ahead and talk more about the internship conception and execution. So for the execution, we started off with the onboarding process. You can go to the next slide. So for onboarding, we first started with recruitment. So we gave an intro to the company and expectations of the internship, an intro to the projects that they'd be working on, and the structure that we'd be following, as well as some tips and tricks on how to be successful. And we did this in the form of a slideshow presentation. And one of the things that we're looking to change in the future is to make it more interactive. We found that some of the parts, especially the tips and tricks, when we made them interactive, it was more engaging for the interns, and they actually learned more from it being interactive than just having us speak at them. Next slide. So for the projects, we learned a few things. We learned that the interns would work together in their teams, and then they would complete their projects more effectively and efficiently, rather than just having them do them individually and then come together as a team later on. We also introduced weekly journals, which gave the interns an opportunity to kind of reflect on their experiences each week. And they were also insightful to us because we learned what things were working and what things weren't, and we could improve upon that the next week. Things that didn't go well for us were some of the projects required a lot more assistance than we had anticipated. Some of the project descriptions were confusing to some of the interns. And so there was a lot more explanation at the beginning of the week that went into each project in order for the interns to complete it successfully. Next slide. So for future changes in the projects, we want to continue to have projects in different areas of tech. That was one thing that we strive to do in creating the different projects. We also would like to make the projects have a walkthrough at the beginning. So kind of taking the interns through a simple version of the project that they're going to be working on to kind of teach them the skills that they'd be using and the software that they might be interacting with, as well as including examples in the project description to help guide them when they're looking through it themselves and completing their project. We'd also like to implement weekly project presentations with the big yolBe team to get feedback and for the interns to present what they've been working on for the whole week, since these projects are not only benefiting the interns, but also the company as well. Next slide. As far as the process, we had a weekly cadence of delivery, which included daily stand-up calls, which were just short little check-ins to make sure that everyone knew what their task was for that day and to make sure that everyone was on track to complete the project. We made sure that everything was easy to explain and well understood in those those daily calls. As well as allowed for a clear understanding of their progress for both the interns and us as the managers. Things that didn't go well was we had a team size that was too small. When we originally designed the projects, we had anticipated our teams would be about 5 interns, but it ended up being only about 3, which we found was not sufficient to complete the amount of work that we were asking of them. There was also inconsistent usage of the forums. We had tried to just do a once a week stand-up call to just make sure everyone was on track, but we found that that wasn't working for our interns. So we decided to implement a daily stand-up and more consistent check-ins. We'd also like to integrate the interns into the larger yolBe team so that they can get kind of a feel for how it is to work in a larger team of the actual company rather than just their peers. Next slide. So future changes for the process, we want to introduce team norms, and that's one of the things we'd like to make interactive is during the onboarding process, kind of have everyone give their ideas and then create a set of team norms that everyone follows throughout the internship period. We'd also like to introduce a Scrum Master role, which is basically just someone on each team that makes sure that the rest of the team is held accountable for the work that they volunteered to do for the completion of the project. And this person would kind of take the lead during the stand-ups and get everyone to check in and make sure that they're on track to complete the project by the end of the week. We'd also like to incorporate the use of our yolBe app to facilitate the group communication rather than using email or Slack. We'd also like to track team weekly sprint work in the Jira tool. That tool is a tracking of just various tasks that the current yolBe team uses. And so we'd like to implement that into the internship to kind of mimic life in like a real company rather than having something completely different. And we'd also use that tool to help keep stand-ups on track. And so they can use those tasks in the Jira tool to reflect on the work that they're completing throughout the week. One of the things the yolBe team does is also conduct retrospectives every 2 weeks. So kind of to mimic that in our internship, we'd like to incorporate a retrospective at the end of the week to just reflect on how the project went, how the team was working together each week to kind of make sure that we're following the team norms and everything is being done and everyone's working together, and just to celebrate the wins of that week. We'd also like to conduct daily check-ins to make sure that everyone is on track and understands the project. And these can be just small, quick check-ins through a short message or even just a quick 10-minute video chat. Next slide, please. And for parting thoughts, these are the 4 main things that we took away from this first internship period. One was that onboarding was a key part of the process. It kind of set the tone for the whole internship and laid out all the expectations and kind of gave an insight into what the interns would be working on. We'd like to implement shorter, more frequent check-ins. We learned that it was more beneficial to the interns to be able to give us feedback on how they were doing, ask any questions they had. We also found that having both group and individual projects were beneficial because it gave interns the ability to complete work on their own, but then also have projects where they were working in groups and implement that teamwork aspect that's pretty big in tech. And finally, we wanted to implement weekly training sessions. This way, the interns are not only doing work and learning from their hands-on experiences, but they're also learning from members of the yolBe team and learning about their positions and kind of what our team members do.
Well, that concludes our presentation for today. I want to sincerely thank all of our panelists for sharing your time, your expertise, and your knowledge with us today. Thank you to the VCU team for hosting this webinar, and to you, our viewers, for making time in your busy schedules to join us. If you'd like additional information on the TechPrep project, please feel free to contact Dr. Tim Tansey. His email address is on the slide here, tntansey@wisc.edu. And Tim will be more than happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you again. We appreciate your time and we look forward to seeing you in the future.